All right, welcome everyone. This is Elias Haddad. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Dave Conley. What's up, Dave?
Hey everyone. Hey Eli, how you doing?
Good, man. Welcome to the podcast world.
Oh my God.
You know, this is all part of it. This is how I've talked for a long time about downloading my brain in the future. So I wanted to try to hold on for another like 50 years just to see what
Yeah, yeah,
technology does.
right.
But the reality is we're downloading our brain every single day we post something.
All
When
the
we
time.
talk, it's all creating this like avatar in the world. I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen that movie, Social Dilemma, but basically there's this avatar of
Yeah,
ourselves on this world of who
right.
we put out there. So here we are, downloading our brain to the world. And I think the goal of this show for myself is literally just putting my thoughts out there,
Mm,
not trying to be political, not trying to be um, uh, more philosophical more than anything. I
yeah.
mean, I would like at my gravestone, if I put one up, to say philosopher on it.
Oh, I say you are already a philosopher king, my friend. This is yeah, yeah, yeah. You got that one already. So yeah.
Yeah. So our first show, I want to introduce everybody to you and myself. So, let's start. Dave, where are you from? What's your story? Where'd you come from?
Oh my
Then we
God.
can talk about how we met.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. And until there was a number of like shows like NCIS that were actually supposedly like in Washington D.C. Nobody knew where I grew up, so I just said, I grew up in D.C. And they were always like, oh, where in D.C.? And I'm like, oh, you don't know. It's this little town just outside called Falls Church, and like everybody suddenly knew it because it was always the place where they were racing to go and catch a bad guy. They were always going through Falls Church, and I said nobody's racing in Washington D.C. The traffic's terrible. So yeah, I grew up just outside of Washington D.C.
DC, I love DC. First time I went there, I was 18 years old. It was the first time I actually been to a city on my own.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
I helped my uncle move. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. I was born in Jordan. My family immigrated to Yonkers, New York, and then we came to Lexington. I'd never been to a big city on my own.
so
I
D.C.
helped
was the
my
first.
Yeah, and my uncle's like help him drop him off, and he got a job at the Health and Human Services or something like that for the
Yeah,
government, and
yeah.
he's like, all right, well, good luck. And I'm like, good luck with what? I thought we are doing stuff. And he's like, yeah, you're doing stuff. I got to go to work. And I'm like, uh, okay. So that was my first experience of it. And then I did get lost. And what's interesting with that city is like, you'll hit one street and it's unbelievable multi-million-dollar homes. And then you go up one and it's like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here,
Oh,
and
totally. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's changed a lot since you were 18. It had a huge renaissance after 9/11 because so much money poured into the city.
yeah.
Um, and it was when I was growing up, it was really a sleepy little town where like all of the roads really, rolled up about 8 o'clock at night. Like it
Oh,
was it
wow.
was it was such a quiet government town. Um, that's all that ever happened, and it was sort of just like suburban and slow. And then by 2001, just everything started changing, and it's turned into this amazing. It was always an international city, right?
Yeah.
It always had a real international flair. My friends, nobody, very few people were like native English speakers, like in the neighborhoods or whatever. Everybody was like from somewhere else. And if they weren't, native English speakers, or if they were native English speakers, they came from somewhere else. There are very few just like born and bred native Washingtonians.
Yeah.
Um, and man, I will tell you right now, if I did not grow up there, I would certainly live there today. It has so much going on, such a great food scene, such uh, all sorts of different things going on. People still just associate it with a government town, but that's like associating San Francisco with just tech, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big mistake, right? Like what DC is that it's just a hub of all sorts of amazing things, everything from Amazon moving there, Volkswagen USA is headquartered there, Marriott and a bunch of hotels. So like it has, I'm telling you, it has a lot going for it. On top of just having just weird ass traffic.
Yeah.
But otherwise, amazing town. Yeah. So everybody usually goes there, as a teenager with their high school. But you got there through family, huh?
Yeah, yeah, it was an interesting experience, and it probably scared me from moving away from Lexington for a while. That's probably why I got stuck there. I was like, "Oh, I can't handle this."
Oh my God.
So so you left DC, where'd you go next? What happened? What was your journey?
I spent most of my life in DC.
Okay.
I left there just to get the hell out of Dodge for college. I went to the
Mm.
University of Colorado at Boulder, and that's a place, man. Like day one, they hand you like a 6-pack of Keystone and a bong, and I was not built for that. I was a pretty goody two shoes sort of high schooler that went to a very small high school. Again, just outside of DC. And so dropping into one of the largest universities in the United States, melted my brain, and I didn't know how to handle it. So I sort of was like, flitting in and out of college, but I totally appreciated my time in Boulder. It's beautiful, and I've been there, recently, just in the last couple of years, and I just it's shocking how much it's, you know, uh, stayed the same and changed, and that's what I love about, certain places, that as that they seem to have a timeless quality to them.
Yeah.
And Boulder, surprisingly, being so far out west, is one of those kind of timeless places where it seems to have a vibe and a look and a feel that will just always be. And then went back to DC, and then had a job opportunity in Columbus, Ohio, of all places, and moved up there. But that was short lived. But I was really happy to experience part of the sort of the gateway to the Midwest,
Yeah.
and experience that. Again, another place that was totally surprising, in so many ways. And I was the first of my immediate family to really move and get out, right?
Wow.
And that extended when I went back to DC, and a few years later decided to, put a bookend there, and say, okay, I'm done. And so I really just threw my fate to the wind, and to see where. And I spent about a year traveling, just to, going from place to place, kind of using DC as a hub. And started asking just friends. I was doing a goodbye tour. Like one of those, like, like, oh, let's go get lunch, let's go get dinner, I'm leaving soon. And they're like, where are you going? I'm like, I don't know, where should I go? And one of my friends said, hey, why don't you be my roommate? I'm like, sure, where? And he said, San Francisco. And I'm like, huh, okay. So I just packed a couple of bags and went to San Francisco, and ended up in this, amazing 6,000 square foot mansion in Ashbury Heights. And, like, I thought everybody lived like this, and like, no, nobody, like 6 people live like this in San Francisco, and they're all on that street. And then that started my journey to San Francisco, and love that city. Amazing city. So many good things about it. And yet, I certainly, in the last year and a half, I've felt a real calling that the world is a big place,
Yeah.
and there are those more experiences to be had. And I love the freedom of experiencing the new, right? Um, the work that I do is engineered very specifically to work really well near an international airport and an internet connection.
So
Um,
tell us about what
so,
you do, man. Tell us a little bit.
so I ended up in Miami, and that's where I am today.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
and that brings us where what do you do for a living, man? You just kind of float around. What's your story? I think for one of the things that that you and I met in on a little retreat in Mexico,
Oh, so good.
and I think your story really touched me
Oh,
on where you came from and how you got to be the person that you are, and up to where you're healing now from a surgery. So
oh
I
my
think
God.
I really got to share this story. It's probably one of the most amazing, most touching stories, and kind of talks about what you do now.
Well, I love at the top that you mentioned the documentary, The Social Dilemma, and I think anybody who had a Netflix subscription in the last 3 months has probably seen or been told to watch that. And what resonated the most with that doc for me is that actually I started going around and apologizing to people because I created it. I created that problem. And, I have had the pleasure of meeting Tristan Harris several times in San Francisco and at conferences, and several of those folks, and they are the second generation of the internet.
Mhm.
They're the Facebooks and the Googles and the Web 2.0, wonder kids that really popped up after 2000.
Yeah.
I was I was their I I started that problem, and that was my first gig. A friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, my company's hiring stupid, and clearly you're just meandering about. So you're qualified. Why don't you come down?" And I did, and I was just this sea of people, and I got the job. I was so green and so unheard of. Like I had no idea what I was doing. They were like, "How much would you like to make?" And fortunately, I can do math pretty quickly in my head, and I did all the math, and I'm like, man, I'd be really rolling in it if I made $24,000 a year, $26,000 a year. And they said, that's good because it starts at 32. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I already got a raise. And so I started as a project manager, which I had no idea what they did. And I started as a project manager at AOL. And at the time I was, it had just gone, public. We just reached 1 million people on the internet. So it was still, new. And it turned out I was good at what I did. I didn't know what I did, but I had to learn, and I loved the environment of that, entrepreneur, like, let's make it up. We don't know. There is no rule book. There's no, like, we don't know, right? We're just making it up and going head to head with companies that were monsters like Microsoft and Yahoo and Prodigy.
I remember
And
Prodigy. That was my
oh my
first
God.
internet provider.
Right. Everybody had, one of them. Right. And we were all, we were all in it together. And I became the youngest director at the company in project management. I started to, and I was responsible for all of the software. So like all of the software that came on the CDs, what was at the time called the client, right? All the stuff that you put onto your computer and that connected to the back end. And then I was the director of project management, and then I went into quality assurance. I went into development management. I did metrics and back end work. I ran part of Netscape for a while.
Oh
Ran
wow.
part of CompuServe for a while. That's old school. That was even before us, right? We happened
Yeah.
to buy CompuServe, but that was our parents' internet stuff. And but then it was uh, it was when we bought Time Warner, and had this huge company of Warner Brothers, and we owned like, you know, the Cartoon Network and CNN and Time Magazine, that we ended up shifting our business models around. And that's when I had, you know, a lot of help in creating some of the things that the social dilemma points out, which is like we had created all of these systems in order to tell if shitty things were happening on the service, because you know we would get these like random reports and we'd look at the logs and we were like, I don't know, we don't know what happened. So we started like instrumenting out the system in order to see what was going on. And that's when we started shifting our business model to advertising. And they're like, can we use those systems in order to like tell more things about people? And we're like, yes, you can. We didn't know at the time that that was such an evil thing to do, or that would be weaponized, you know, like a decade in the future. But we were creating 8 or 9 different profiles of people to target advertise them in 1999.
So like the avatar that basically is being created now,
we
you guys
created it.
had like 8 or 9 of them, as opposed to now where every single person has their own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
We had bought a company that had done, you know, online profiling. We were figuring out online metrics, you know, all the ones that you use today. You know, we were playing around with all of those things. We were looking at things like, time spent online. We were looking at, you know, just and then click throughs and to advertising and then transactions. That was all 90s work. And yeah, we were using it to target advertising back then. And I can't even imagine, I mean, watching the social dilemma, seeing how it's been so weaponized, how artificial intelligence and the amount of data has been used so that machines are programming us. It's now a bit of a calling of mine to really help others, you know, deprogram and get more of their life back. Because after that time at AOL and really spending a lot of time dismantling the company because the company did not do well with Time Warner. I spent a lot of time firing my friends and firing thousands of people. I took about a year off. I took a package and I was like, oh man, I gotta get, you know, some of the evil out of my system from this crazy ride, because we'd started with, we want to change the world. That was our mission. To, you know, what's our, you know, good God, what's our EBITDA, you know, like that's all we talked about, you know, earnings for income and taxes and depreciation. Oh my God. So it went from being a service oriented company to, you know, being one run by MBAs. I say that with all due respect. I now have an MBA, so because I went and got it just to see what these crazy people were talking about. I took about a year off, and a friend of mine, when the Obama administration first came in, they really wanted to bring in private sector thinking into the public sector. And a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, would you join me in this?" And I said, "Sure." You know, I'd been, you know, thinking about getting back into technology management. And at the time, you might remember, you know, 2007, 2008, the economy was in a really bad place. So I started at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, really paying attention to all of their technology and technology systems. Ended up being the SES in charge of all of their technical systems, right? Like if you had to put in a patent, if you had to put in a trademark, you had to go through my systems. And then some you know, unexpected life happens. I was just writing yesterday because my job, my daytime gig now is as an author and as a speaker, and I do some coaching. But the writing I was doing, the phrase that came out was that life, you know, happens in the places in between, right? The learning happens at the times of stress, at the times of like the pointy ends, right? And I had one of those moments. I had been married successfully and beautifully to an amazing woman for 13 years, and she unexpectedly got a cold one day, and like the weird series of events that happened ended up becoming a research paper published that year that she unexpectedly passed. Went from having a cold to us having a service within 10 days.
Wow.
And that was a thing, right? And I will say right now that the truly I am here today because Carol passed. The backstory of all this, doing all of this work at AOL, all this work at the patent office, the rest of it, I was also profoundly unhealthy. I weighed 330 pounds. I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. And I was not liking my job, right? So like all of my life categories, except for this, my beautiful wife, Carol, was like really, really kind of sideways. And then that went sideways.
Yeah.
So that was, I could mark that as the beginning, not the cause, but certainly the beginning of saying, okay, what is this life really all about? I mean, I was 39 years old and I was a widower. I was at the top of my profession, and I hated it. And that was the moment of like, oh, okay, so what is this? What is this life all about? And I really had to choose whether or not I was going to live or die. That was really it, because I now know what it means to die of a broken heart, because all of the life gets drained out of it, and you stop eating, you stop drinking, you stop sleeping. I mean, all of your life function goes sideways as you deal with this grief and depression and this loss. And that beautiful, grateful moment of realizing that I had to choose to live was magic. That was amazing. Why? Because for the first time, I believed I had choice. I felt like I had been sort of like, I up until that moment, I knew that if I just did what everybody else did, I'd be fine, right? Get married, get a good job, get some education, you just do what everybody does. And I wasn't. Now everything was off and I was still miserable. It's like, okay, so what do I do with that? And do I want to live? What kind of life do I want to live? What is it that I want to be doing? Whatever it is I've been doing up until this point, up into the first 39 years, those choices weren't working out for me. Yet externally, I was so successful.
Yeah.
So I started by saying, okay, I want to live, and I want to live a different life. And this different life started with simply drinking some water. I know that sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you stop drinking. I mean, you literally stop drinking water, right? In the depths of this grief, because whatever it is that's in you that says, okay, drink water, just shuts off as you're like dealing with like the chaos of your life. So I started drinking water, and then I started moving a little. I started making different choices about what I ate. And I started learning a lot about me. I didn't know much about like what it meant to be human, all the functioning of just like being human. What are the things that I really liked and disliked? What is it that what had meaning to me? What was important to me? I didn't have kids. And I had all the trappings of success, but like, what is it that I really wanted? And so over the course of 4 years, I lost 150 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Another person.
And an entire human. For some of our mutual friends, it's more than an entire human, right? Hello to Pollock out there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Lost 150 pounds. And I got back to my entrepreneurial roots, back, to where, there were no rules. And so I quit the patent office, started 7 or 8 companies with friends, really learned entrepreneurship, went and got that technical MBA, and really started exploring, sort of the renaissance of like, okay, Dave 2.0, like, what is this going to be? In all of that, I also got remarried to a beautiful and accomplished woman, that we met in a widower support group. She had lost her husband a month before Carol passed, and we got married and moved in together down at my place in DC and started a new life. And yet, while I was doing all of this, I was also figuring out who I was, right? I was now in my, in my early 40s and going into my mid 40s. And I'm like, okay, okay, like everything's sort of okay again, right? Like I've sort of put it all back together, and like, okay, then the curiosity comes again. Like, okay, what's next? Where am I going next? Uh, I realized that my marriage was good, but I knew that I would regret it at the end of my life. And so, even though it was a good marriage, we gracefully and with as much love as we could bring to it did go our separate ways. Um, and and I was running these or doing all of these different companies, yet most of my time was on health and wellness. And so I was like, oh, so I got a great mentor, and I was like, well, people pay me to do health and wellness work with them. And they said, yeah, as a matter of fact, they will. They said, you are unique in this field in that you've done the work, you lost the weight, you've learned the lessons, and you speak executive. There's not a lot of people on the planet that can say that, right?
Yeah.
So I went and was working with senior executives and other sort of people with weird responsibilities, weird jobs, um, to help change their life, often lose, over 100 pounds. And I got really good at that.
Yeah.
Just being in that very sort of that niche market of like, okay, if you need to lose triple digits, you call Dave, right?
Oh, wow.
I did that, and then started writing a book on this, like what this sort of this executive's journey to weight loss and health management and the rest of it, because I'd gotten super nerdy on it and super experimental. And uh, the work took an unexpected journey when my editor called me and said, "Hey, we've got to get together," which is fine. She lives actually outside of the country, and I was living in San Francisco. So we ended up meeting in Arizona, of all places. And she's like, "I really like your book. It's interesting, but this one chapter on midlife is we've let's would you consider refactoring this book on midlife?" And because the whole chapter was saying, my life felt like it took a really weird turn, right as I was getting into midlife. I was 39, I was a widow, and like, oh, and I had all these changes, and it's been pretty magical. I've really come into my own, and I feel like I've really, learned some amazing lessons about midlife. But what I'm finding with my peers and what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing in the conversation is that midlife mostly sucks for people. Uh, that's why we make jokes about it. It's this midlife crisis, right?
They buy
And
the Corvette.
right, you buy a Corvette, you get a big boob blonde, you go off and you start an Etsy store, and like there's all sorts of stuff, right? The jokes of midlife. And I was like, let's refactor this book on that. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So now a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I'd become a speaker. I started really leaning into midlife as an interesting place of changing that conversation, changing that experience, because I was having a fairly rare experience of a magical midlife, and I want everyone to have that experience. And so I'm finishing up the next draft of the book and starting to shop it. And so that is my world right now. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I do still some coaching, but mostly on the up leveling of your life. Sometimes it's health and wellness, but mostly on the up leveling of one's life, from wherever you are today to wherever it's going. Um,
So what's that? So
yeah,
you've helped people lose triple digits. What's
yeah, many.
your first step was just drinking water.
Right.
What is um, the overview of it? What's the, okay, start drinking water. How do you get somebody to lose 100 pounds? That is just like, that
Yeah,
seems like a hill impossible to climb. I mean, I'm trying to lose like 8 pounds and I'm like, holy shit, this is a hard job.
yeah.
Imagine to do like, you know, 10 times that is insane. So like, what's the synopsis behind it? What is the deal? What is the key to the success?
The If you ever want to learn about any diet, just find the largest person in your personal network and start talking to them, because I believe me, I had been on every single diet. I knew them all. I knew every crazy diet, every medical diet. You know, if it was Atkins, if it was Pritikin, if it was Weight Watchers, or you name it, I had been on it. So if you want to, there was no lack of knowledge, right? There was, I knew what I needed to do. The real question was, why wasn't I doing it? Or why would it work for a little bit and then stop, right? Uh, and yet that is way more universal, right? And a big chunk of what I write about is permanent lifelong change. What are the relationships that we have? What are the programs underneath? What are the feelings around the things that we do?
Mm.
And how do we change those so that we have permanent change? What bothers me about the $30 billion self-help industry is that it is completely built on buying the next book, going to the next workshop, attending the next seminar. Like, if you, God bless Tony Robbins for doing, the work that he does. And but what I know from that work is that it is built so that you have to go to the next thing, right? In order to keep on getting the changes that you want. You have to like grind it, and it has to, it's this process of change that I rarely see in the self-help industry, and yet everybody wants it, right? So that is really the focus of how to lose 100 pounds or 8. Is most of our behavior is built on these unconscious patterns and programs and how we feel. If we feel it, we do it. And, you may think that you are the most logical, thought out person on the planet, and God bless you. I believe that you believe that too. It is simply not the case. They so see it over and over again that we have unconscious programs and we have feelings, and that rules our lives because it's incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
Like, we reserve our brain, our thinking consciousness, for decision making, and we only have room for decision making basically one thing at a time. Maybe two or three things at a time, right? That's the flitting from thing to thing to thing to thing. Those are all decision making.
Yeah.
Everything else happens unconscious or subconsciously, or in an alternate state of consciousness, because it's efficient. If you had to think about every time you got into a car how to drive a car, you would be in a ditch or in the wall every single time. If you've ever learned an instrument, or if one of your kids has ever learned an instrument, the first few months can be excruciating, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as those conscious patterns become unconscious, then you go from learning music to playing music. You go from, you know,
Yeah.
herky jerky of driving a car to really being able to, like, you know, flip on the radio and talk on the phone and text, and but don't do any of that, right? That's that magical area that also stops us from getting what we want.
Mhm.
And so my work is about adding as much choice as possible, so that you consciously bring up more choice in your world. For me, all of my choice had been blotted out because I was dealing with the grief of Carol. And so I only had one thing on my menu, and that was drink water. Because I knew if I didn't drink water, that'd be a problem, right? You know,
Yeah.
you can't go very long, right? So, rewind, play, drink water. So, how does that work in our habits, our behaviors, our environment, all of those interesting areas of life so that we can actually get the things that we want and stay away from the things that we don't want? The changing of, like, losing 8 pounds or 80 is actually fairly similar. It's just a matter of scale. It's changing one's relationship primarily with food,
Yeah.
because you just can't exercise your way out of it. So it's primarily changing one's relationship and one's emotional relationship with food,
Yeah, it's
and
funny.
how does it
Something
work?
that really kind of lit a light bulb in my head about the moments of when I do order that Oreo milkshake. Like, when am I ordering that? Is when I'm
Yes.
tired and I have this motion of like my basically my willpower is given up for the day,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like this. But it really clicked with me when you said that feelings. Like, now it's kind of like, before I order that, what am I feeling?
What do you feel?
What am I feeling that makes me want to order that? So that was awesome, man. Thank you. That's a great little tip out of the beginning. So.
Just notice a feeling, then you're like, fantastic. And how do you change it?
Mhm.
You take that feeling and you just anchor it to you anchor it to a different behavior rather than buying an Oreo, milkshake. It's like, oh, I want to take that feeling and anchor it to actually something that will benefit me, not in the short term, because it feels really good to drink that milkshake. And I'm not knocking it. I'm sure there's a Ben and Jerry's in my freezer waiting with my name on it, right? But when it becomes problematic is when you want to get healthier or be healthier, and that's a default mode. So we
Yeah.
want to change those default modes.
Yeah, I think there's something when I coach real estate agents, it's about changing small behaviors and
Hmm.
constantly doing those small behavioral changes. And it's just really taking that first step to that behavioral change. And it's like, how do you get to that point for the first step? Well, drinking water is that
Yeah,
first step. And there's a lot of, I know it may sound crazy to some of the listeners, is like drinking water, but there's a lot of people, their liquid intake is soda and coffee, soda
totally.
or coffee. That's it. There's no cup of water next to them that they're drinking and taking that down. So it's it's crazy. I mean, to get somebody to lose 100 pounds is that's not actually, it's not crazy because it's doable. Like, it's a totally doable thing.
Totally doable. And it is about, like, making sure it's not the ups and down, ups and down. I would say most, if not all, of everyone who you see that is morbidly obese. And I believe me, half my family is from Kentucky, so I've been in your neck of the woods. I know what it looks like. uh, all of them have been of normal weight at some point in their lives, right? And sometimes they've been of normal weight several times. It's the up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So that's not the permanent lifelong change. That's the grin, grit and muscle through, and then lose it, and then you're back to the old patterns and old conditioning. We
Yeah.
don't want that anymore. And so that's the thing that I do primarily is really focus on how to live this amazing, big, beautiful life, because we live in a cage of our own making. Like, the pain and the suffering that we experience is one that we create,
Mhm.
and that pain causes so much weird ass behavior because, it's like we do stupid stuff because it feels good to do stupid stuff sometimes.
Mhm.
So when that starts interfering with your life, and it happens particularly at midlife, it's as predictable as puberty.
Yeah.
That's the change that I want to bring to the world.
Yeah, I find, and this is kind of a question towards you. Did you, or is it really delving into like past trauma that really kind of can help you get to the points of like identifying what that feeling is coming from, like dealing with this like shadow work that you and I have done
Totally.
in what we did in Mexico and stuff is that seems like it would be the most, pinpoint, let's find what's really there. And it's hard to go deep. It's hard to
Yeah.
like really bring up um those emotions that just devastate you, that are
Yes.
yeah, it's hard to do that. I mean, I started my emotional intelligence work in 2019. So this is going on my second. April will be my 2-year anniversary of really like trying to figure out like, what are causing my
What's
behaviors.
causing it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so what, lean into that. Like what does somebody have to do to like kind of lean into the pain that's hard to do?
Right, because you learn, uh, I'll- you when you learn, not to touch a hot pan, right? And you only learn it once before you're like, oh, I need an oven mitt, right? Like I need a towel before I touch that hot pan. That work that you're talking about is saying, oh no, we want you to actually go grab that pan again and again and again. And you're going to keep on grabbing it until like it's okay, until it cools off. Um, a lot of our behavior, most of our unwanted behavior gets cemented into us very, very early. And it's because those behaviors served us then, right? Whatever it was, we were in service to, like, this makes us the most survivable. This makes us the most livable, the most bearable, that gives us the most joy and most pleasure. I mean, we're just machines when we're, as we're gestating, as we're, coming out into the world, we're just machines of learning. And so we learn all these patterns and they become very, very cemented into us because that's how we survive. That's our prime directive: live to see the sunrise and pass along our genes. And so everything that we can do to keep on doing that, we're going to do. And our body and our mind learns how to do these patterns over and over again because it's efficient and it's learning, right? It's like, okay, great. We know when we do this, we get fed, like, fantastic, right? We know when we do this, we get comforted. Fantastic. Keep doing that, right? It's when those patterns get exaggerated or no longer serve that it just, as we age, it becomes more difficult to go in and make those changes. Not impossible, just difficult. And what's really great about looking at the shadow work or looking at the earliest memories of these things is that you're getting at the big meaty centers of some of your big behaviors, right? You're not that change and behaviors don't happen much later in life, right? If I mean, once I start identifying as something, you become it, right? Like if I learned to juggle and today, right? And if that's all I did and I became like, the jungling guy, like I could identify as a juggler and, Barnum Bailey Circus would be right around the corner, right? I mean, it happens, right? When we learn new behaviors, they become part of our identity, right? They can become something that you keep on doing, right? So, but these are new things. It's the old ones that are fascinating, right? Because they are often the ones that are right in front of us, that we know why we do them. And those are the ones that often stopping us from getting what we want in the current tense, right? It's just old stuff that worked really well for us and continues to be of service in some way, just not in what we want. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, how can we pop this up, play around with it? Because we're bringing it from the subconscious to the conscious, play with it, and then put it back. I mean, it's the function of cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what you do. You're like, okay, it's like, what's the behavior? Let's pull it up into the consciousness. Let's play around with it. Let's change the feelings and put it back. That's that. As smart as we think we are, we're kind of dumb monkeys.
Yeah.
We really are quite predictable.
Yeah,
As
ego
the
control.
social dilemma showed us, we are incredibly predictable beasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ego protecting us. It's just like you
Yeah.
said. It's that when ego comes into play. I mean, my biggest mistakes came from letting ego
Tell me.
make that choice. Like where you just, I had a really prolonged success in real estate where
Right.
I just couldn't do anything wrong until I did, and then I really screwed it up. So it's one of those things that you battle with on a daily basis, and changing those behaviors is tough. I can. It's so funny. I had a coach one time um, that said something to me that we basically live multiple lives in one lifetime. Like
Yeah.
I think about who I was in my first before I got married, during my marriage time to the point that I am now, which has been 6 years now, I think, since I've split. And it's when I think about who I am today, and I think about the person that I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's like, holy shit, that is like totally where are we at? Where are we at? And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I think a lot of people are stuck in, like, you see it with your friends from high school whose glory days was high school, or your
Right.
friends whose glory days were college. They're still
They're
living
still there. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's the first step to dealing with those things, realizing that we are in the present. And
Yes.
I just finished the book Conversations with God, which
Mm,
suggested from us. Holy crap! What a great
really.
book. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you got
All
to listen.
right.
It's a lot
I'm
about what
in.
we're talking to, because it was suggested to our One Heart group,
Yeah.
and I just kind of like I downloaded all 3 books. It was like 26 hours of listening, and I'm about 15 hours through it. And a lot of what he talked about is that there's a past, a present, and a future, but the reality is there is no future and there is no past. There is now, and our reality is like, is there really a heaven or hell? I can tell you, I've experienced hell on earth
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
You've experienced hell on earth,
Right.
and like the reality is that heaven is the place of like being present. And
Mm,
once you realize that, it's like, okay, it's not a place we're going, it's a mindset of where we're at, as opposed to, because when you experience hell, you don't realize that you're not in this fiery place of like,
right.
and that's what I took from the book that was really really fascinating. And I think changing people's minds is the hardest thing to do. I went to this, like, it's kind of like this Tony Robbins kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was called the Ascension Leadership Academy in San Diego, where people share their stories, and then you
Yeah.
realize, like, when you're hearing people's stories, it's like, we're all fucked up. Like
Completely.
everybody is like,
Every single one of us.
yeah, yeah, every single person. And
Yes.
people look
And
at it
we
like,
all have tough times.
oh my
And yes.
gosh,
Oh my
like
God.
yeah, and you kind of sit there and look at it and you're like, man, everybody's fucked up. Like
Yeah.
everybody has an issue. Everybody has some trauma. Something's happened to everyone at some point that has basically defined who that person is. And it's the people that are willing to like do that scary work. I mean, to
Hmm.
really like delve in and figure out, like, this is the reason that I feel this way. This
Right.
is the reason that like I treat women this way, or I do
Exactly.
this way. And it's because of something that happened to you when you were 12 or
Yeah.
21, or when you're in
Yeah.
college, you got rejected, and or all these different things. And it's like, are you willing to look at it and do those things? And I don't know if there's a tip out there that I can give anyone, but it's scary work. It's stuff that I think that's it's even hard to bring up to therapists. You know what I mean? It's stuff that is like, you gotta really put the time and effort to focus on those things. And I don't know if you have any kind of tips for it. I can't give anybody any kind of tips for it, because it's like saying, hey, here's this cliff. I promise you that there is a nice soft landing at the edge. I'm just going to push you over. There's just
Right.
you
Right.
can't really convince anyone that it's better at the other side.
I, so there's two ways you can go with this. One of them is, if you're living like most people in this very sort of like deadened state of like, pushing it away, Like they just want to live their lives and do their things, and they junk up their lives with a lot of stuff, possessions, or they deaden it with alcohol or drugs, or like they get through life through crutches, right? And that's okay. Like that, we are the most medicated society, of ever, right? There's, if there's a pill to be sold for anxiety or depression, or it's always in the top, drugs, right? And those are just the prescription ones, all the things that we do, to avoid life,
Mhm.
is sort of the first step of if recognizing whether or not you're avoiding life and where you're avoiding life, I think is really the first step, right? It's like, are you avoiding anything? Like, what are you avoiding? 'Cause the things that you are avoiding are the things that you need to start working on
Yeah, good
first,
point.
right?
Yeah, great point.
It's just like, oh, it's like I think a lot about relationships because I'm not in a primary relationship right now. I think a lot about, the work that I want to bring into the world. Like, what am I not doing, or what I am doing, or what am I avoiding? It's like, and the reasons why I'm avoiding, right? And it's like, you may think, that's okay, right? But we also don't want to over intellectualize it. It's like, there is a magic in just the small and just the doing of like what it is you're avoiding. So when you're talking to a new real estate agent, the changes are in the small, because you get really screwed up, and this happens, actually, we're talking about this at the perfect time of year, because we're talking about this at the top of a year.
Yeah.
This is the time where everybody goes to the gym, and it's like, I'm finally gonna get into shape, right? And it's like, I've been, I want a six pack. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. A six pack doesn't happen by, doing all of the sit ups all at once. Yet that's how we treat it, right?
Yeah.
We was like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym every single day, and it'll be great. And that sets up this cycle of bad feelings, because then you start like, oh my God, you start actually setting these huge expectations. And when you don't meet your own expectations, you associate that behavior with a negative feeling.
Wow.
And so you stop going.
Yeah.
It's like,
Wow.
if you see the number of people who are in the gym in January versus February, and forget about it in March, it's the same people that were there in December.
Yeah.
Like, that's the people that made small changes. So when you're making a habit change, and this isn't new, During talks about it, lots of habit changers talk about this. It starts with, one, what are you avoiding, right? And the second is, what's the smallest, most incremental change you can make in order to get towards whatever it is that you want? For
Yeah.
me, it was drinking water. It's like, how basic can you get? And that led into a virtuous cycle, because some days all I could do was drink a liter of water. That was it, right? That was as much as I was going to, but damn it, I was going to get that liter of water in me. If I had to pee at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was drinking a liter of water at 10 o'clock at night, I was going to do it, right? It's that one small step that creates a virtuous cycle, because it feels good. And if
Yeah.
you can do that one small thing, then you're golden. And
Yeah.
that's where you start making these small changes that make big differences in your life.
Wow. That's good stuff, man. That is good stuff. So what's next for Dave? What's the next thing? Like, you're in Miami now.
I'm in Miami. I moved here 3 weeks
I,
ago.
I can
Yeah.
tell by the decorations behind you, the mirrors.
Right.
People in
Yeah.
Miami love mirrors.
What is it about like beach
They just
communities and
all have great
mirrors?
bodies and tans and
You just
stuff.
want it
It's
right.
like,
Exactly. I'm like, oh, Miami. So Miami so far, it's been a little bit rocky. Just, once I got everything moved in and in, then sort of a vacuum opened up, of like, okay, now what, right? And it really kind of cratered my mood. So I've been really looking at like the last couple of weeks about where my mood has gone, why it's gone, what I can do about that. One of the things that we didn't talk about is when you and I met, I was just about ready to go in for surgery, and I did. So when you lose 150 pounds, it turns out that you get a lot of excess skin that you can't get rid of. You are stretched out, and you are going to stay stretched out. So I had excess skin, and I've been thinking about it for years. So like, I really want to get this excess skin, excised. I want to, it's called a body lift, where they cut you in half. I mean, literally cut you in half, like a magician, right? And they like, it's like pulling up your pant legs and pulling down your shirt, except it's your body, right? And then they sew you back together. It's a 10.5 hour surgery, and it's intense. And so I came back from Mexico and leaned into that. And so just a couple of months ago, and it's this is where the work really matters, because had I not done all of that work when you and I were together in Mexico, had I not been in this field of change and really, I mean, if I was to describe sort of what I do for a living, is that I write about the manual of human that you were supposed to get when you were born. And because these are some really interesting things that I'm finding, right? It's like, oh, this is cool. Let's do this and try this. If I hadn't done that work over the last decade of my life, I don't know where I'd be, because it turns out when you cut off a major part of your body, and they removed 9 pounds of skin, and skin doesn't weigh anything, so it's a lot of skin. They reconstructed me. You or my experience is that I don't know who I am, because literally my mind and body sort of got disconnected, and I got dropped into a brand new body overnight, right? I was drug addled, for the better part of a month, and in San Francisco, and mostly confused, mostly told to just like pop a squat and just be right. And then I decided, like this magical opportunity in Miami showed up, and I'm like, I'm just going to move. I can just do it. But I get to Miami and I get settled, and suddenly I realize how much I have to process with this surgery. I didn't realize that there was this whole psychological component. Nobody talked about it. Shame on my doctor, of like your identity, that was so wrapped up, the thing that kept me so safe and protected as a young person was this weight, right? Food was a safety pattern for me, and I lost that weight. That was great, right? My health got better, and I'd had the weight off for years. I no longer identified as a heavy man. That's what keeps the weight off, right? I don't identify as a heavy man anymore. I thought I was always going to be a heavy man, so I was always going to be a heavy man. I became a very fit man, and I wasn't going to go back, and I can't go back. Yet I had the skin on me, but then I cut it off, right? So whatever that version of Dave was got removed. That turned out to have some psychological impact. And so I've been dealing with that here in Miami, of like, okay, exactly who am I? Because I feel like I'm possessing like a new meat suit of Dave. I don't recognize my body. It's unbelievable, the change. And my identity is in this neonatal sort of state.
Yeah.
And it's confusing and it's crazy, and it can stream you into the future and into the past, which is just anxiety and depression. It keeps you out of the now. And that's been my journey back, of really unscrewing that so that I can take those steps forward, those positive steps forward. And so that's been sort of my world the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
And that's what's next for me. Yeah.
this is actually perfect timing for this podcast, because actually this is quite fascinating for me, because now it's like you can document this emotional changes that are occurring real time.
Right.
So this will be an interesting podcast, man. And believe it or not, we just cranked out an hour pretty quickly.
Wow. That
Yeah,
was easy.
yeah, it was easy.
Look at
Right?
us.
Yeah, and we're just introducing each other now.
We're
So-
right. Haven't even, we've got to start on you.
Yeah. Well, next episode,
Next
it's and I think what I and we can discuss it right now on the podcast. I think what I see coming from this podcast is the journey of two guys.
Yeah.
I see us probably interviewing a few people here and there.
Totally.
We've met some extremely fascinating people in Mexico, which I think we could start with that group. Because there's just a lot of really interesting people there. But I also think it's like this journey of like, I mean, I'll be 41 next week in February, 1st of February. And so I'm starting at that midlife point, and I can say my midlife point probably started 3 years ago when I started growing my hair out. So that may have been my midlife crisis. I always joke with people, I was like, the more spiritual I get, it's like the longer my beard and hair gets. And now I get called Kentucky Jesus by some people. So like, it's like, all right, you meet a brown guy with long hair and a beard, and he looks like Kentucky Jesus. So here we are. So I'm super excited about this. I can't wait for our next episode. And yeah, this is going to be great.
So good.
For everybody that's listening, please follow our show. We'll have a little Facebook page up and everything, and we're excited to see you guys.
Thank you so much.
Cool, man.